Damo, you big sweet tooth.
Yes, MP, you chocoholic.
So Naughty But Nice, we're a hit at the Wellness Summit and I want more.
Well, how does 20 recipes in their free ebook Heavenly Healthy Desserts sound, MP?
Jeepers, Damo, I'm loving that.
Or you can hop on down to their brand new cafe, Selection Cafe in South Melbourne, and receive 10% off your favourite healthy desserts.
Woohoo! To do so, go to sonaughtybutnice.com/couch and fill in your details to receive your free ebook and discount voucher.
That's www.sonaughtybutnice.com/couch.
So Naughty But Nice, delicious nutrition.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives. This is Up for a Chat with Cindy O'Meara, Karen Smith, and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within and then some. I'm Karen Smith.
I'm Kim Morrison.
And I'm Cindy O'Meara.
And I'm a bit excited because I think awakening the change within and inspiring us and then some is pretty fitting for today's guest on our show. We have got one of the most prolific names in athletics and cycling on the show with us today. And Cindy has actually discovered this gem of a man. And we are so excited to welcome you to the show and discover everything about you, everything about your philosophy, everything about the way that you integrate food and mindset and your whole life to become the champion that you are, and that is your whole champion mindset and your whole champion way of being. So Taylor Gunman, welcome to Up for a Chat. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, ladies. Pleasure to be on the show.
Oh, you wait.
Yeah, look, I'll tell everybody up front, it didn't take Kimmy long. She pulled up Taylor's photos on the internet. The first thing she says is, "Oh my God, you're really hot."
And then she said, "Hello, Christmas."
Well, it's kind of like, "Hello, Christmas."
Oh, well, it's quite nice to have a fellow Kiwi online, Taylor, and just to see that you are from Takapuna, which my husband went to Takapuna Grammar School, so it feels very connected to home and everything, and I know Takapuna very well over there in Auckland. So thanks for flying in, especially for Up for a Chat, regardless of the wedding that you've got to go to. But
that's all right.
Tell us, I mean, am I right? You're 24 years of age?
Yep, I'm 24 and been riding a bike for too long.
Tell us how you got into all of this and when did you realise it was going from a hobby into something that you really wanted to create more professionally?
The way you can sum me up is very simple. I was your very typical New Zealand Kiwi kid. I went to Westlake Boys, which is just up the road from Takapuna Grammar, purely for the rugby. Now, Westlake is a very dominant rugby school, and I was the little guy on the field, but I was achieving a lot in the rugby world. But I hated running. And the best way for me to lift my fitness was actually to ride a bike. But then we crossed the path of either going big and playing rugby, or staying a little man, I guess, or a little lean person and having to race a bike. And to me, quite literally, it was as simple as enjoying the freedom of riding a bike. My biggest decision at every day is to go left or right out of the driveway. Whereas in my opinion, most sports, you need a court, you need a ball, you may need somebody else to play with, where, for me, jumping on a bike, the road map's my playground. So, from there on, it has become and developed into what I would say an obsession. You have to be obsessed with riding a bike if you want to ride it for 30 hours a week, rain, hail, or shine. So from there on, I guess it's just become an ever-evolving part of my life.
And so do you do a lot of rides up through Albany and you take yourself way, way up north? Is that the kind of route you take up the coast?
Yeah, I love exploring. Just looking at a map and seeing where it takes me, and I don't mind if it's a gravel road or a paved road. And back in New Zealand, I love riding through the Waitaki Ranges out to Piha more often than anything else. But I am very lucky to have an uncle that lives here in Mooloolaba, so I love coming here and riding up to Montville and then going to Noosa. And to a lot of people, that's a big day trip in the car. But, for me, it's quite cool that I can casually say I'll ride up to Noosa or ride to these places and give a point A to point B idea of what I actually achieve or what I'm doing in a day.
So it's fair to say you've got hot legs, and how's that butt?
My butt, well, jeez. Yeah. I'm sorry, I got bad news, but you'd have to ask my girlfriend, but my butt's covered in scars, so
yes, I would
I've
imagine.
just come off from a crash and it's all scar tissue, but I guess it's a plausible excuse to shave your legs and have a nice tan. So, but it's only to a very defined line, of course, because our cycle pants stop, and I try not to have the infamous tan lines of the sport as much as possible.
Taylor, you said that you ride 30 hours a week. Now, most people would be working 30 hours a week or 40 hours a week. That is a massive commitment to anything, really. Tell us about what it actually takes from a mental point of view to be able to get up every morning and know that that's what your day is going to be all about. I mean, that must, if it's something that you love and you're totally passionate about, I mean, you must feel like the luckiest person breathing.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved into a lifestyle. It's never a chore to me. I want to go out and I want to ride my bike, and I'm actually very lucky to be able to ride my bike. It's opened many doors for me that aren't open to most people in life. I've lived in Boulder, Colorado, in America. I've lived in Portland. I've lived in Belgium. Every day I get up and I look forward to riding my bike, even when it's a hard. I'm going through a bad phase or a good phase, and the mega highs with the mega lows. It's at the end of the day, it's still something I look forward to doing, and it's just evolved into a lifestyle, and you have these environments, and you got to surround yourself with people with similar ideas and similar aspects, and I guess principles, and it's easy to go out and ride when there's, I guess, a local friend who's just as motivated or something like that. It pushes you, it gets you out the door when it's raining, or makes you do that one extra effort or something like that. So I think it's the competition side of it, but it's also the freedom, and like I said, again, the lifestyle of just what it takes to get yourself in shape to perform at a high level.
Taylor, what's your distance? What is your expertise? What's your race?
My strength, I would say, is a tour rider. So we're saying multiple days after days, a tour from a week long to 12 days long kind of thing. We have hilly stages. Tour of Southland, you do 100, start from Te Anau, you go through up along into Queenstown and finish at the top of Coronet Peak. So these are kind of like medium mountains would be my strength, and then time trialing. So I guess the jack of all trades, or pretty okay at everything, but not astounding at one thing just yet kind of thing. So it's a good place to be. It's kind of the middle ground, but in an aspect of results and racing, it offers a lot more opportunity.
And the life of a cyclist? Sorry,
the life of a cyclist?
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. Originally, I've just come over to Australia for a month of racing, and I stayed on for 2 weeks because my cousin's having a wedding in Noosa. But, I was due to go home with the family at the end of this trip, and I've just had the whole calendar and everything change on me. So now I'm here for another 8 weeks before I get to actually go home. So I'll be lucky to be back mid-November in New Zealand. So you just roll with the punches, and but you're not going to hear me complain, because the fact that we get to travel so much, and fortunate to have great sponsors and a great team in Avanti Racing that actually make it possible and fund it for the lifestyle, I guess.
What I was going to ask, Taylor, was, we were talking last night, and, you were talking about, you live in all sorts of different places. And I also know that you manipulate your diet beautifully in order to race or train. How is it, first of all, when you're traveling, to stick to a good diet? Because this is always the question that we get asked, because all of us travel. But as an athlete, knowing that you have to be at your peak, knowing that you have to eat the right foods, how difficult is that with your traveling and living in Berlin and Colorado and Portland, Oregon? I guess that was where you were talking about, and around the world, New Zealand, Australia. Tell me how you do that.
Look, of course, like the rule of anything, piss poor preparation and it makes for a poor performance. But you have to be organised and always plan things ahead. I brought over the product of Pure Delish. I'm very lucky to have a New Zealand company that looks after me with their bars and these nut bars which I can travel with, and it's good to have healthy food in my backpack for when I'm traveling that I can have at the airport instead of buying those muffins or the brownies or those other options that I guess aren't as healthy as they say they are. So it's a good way of controlling what I can eat. But then it's a simple thing of also having done the research or I enjoy walking around supermarkets, and I'd rather make things from scratch. So if I can't get a certain cereal or nothing's offered, it's a bit of fun actually seeing what you can come up with when it comes to having to make your own granola or your own muesli and toast it that way. So it does offer a challenge, but at the end of the day too, it is a challenge which I enjoy, is trying to emulate my diet around the world as well. So I think at the end of the day, it's just trying to plan ahead and just find out what works for you, what you can do and what you can't do, because I guess some people do get very caught up on their diets, but sometimes you just have to accept that, culturally, for example, being in Japan, they don't have cereals, so we had to have rice, but there's nothing wrong with rice and their scrambled eggs. It's just, I guess sometimes you just have to accept it and just learn why and understand what you're eating and what it's actually doing for you as well.
It's interesting.
Sorry, Kimmy.
Everybody's got something to ask.
You go, Kim.
I think it's interesting that, and particularly in New Zealand, I know this from Danny when he was an athlete, and obviously the All Blacks. There's a lot of and the netballers, there's a lot around nutrition, and a lot of dietitians and nutritionists seem to think that, breakfast cereals and things like this and bars and all of that are the best and one of the best ways to go. But, I would imagine for someone like you, and particularly what I found with Danny was, he loved nothing more than just plain nuts and maybe and coconut water, and he was quite ahead of his time when it came to diet, but a lot of that was because he ended up with parasites and things like that from places like India. So he knew from a very, very young age that food meant everything to him. That is your food source. That is what, like you say, on the day, it really does come down to that. Do you get conflicting advice in your arena? Because I know from Cindy's perspective and ours, there's a conflict within nutritionists, there's conflict within dietitians, there's conflict within corporations, particularly when you throw in the whole thing around sponsorship and things like that. I just wondered, as a 24-year-old man, how easy that is for you to keep everyone happy but do what's right for you.
Yeah, there is. I guess it's like anything in the world, and the thing is with cycling is our sport is very unique, and my bike. I might be on a team. We have matching bikes. We have the same shifting componentry, but I might like a certain type of handlebar or a certain type of handlebar tape or a different saddle. You can't make everyone on our team ride the same saddle because we're all built differently. And it's exactly
You've all
the
got
same.
different butts.
Oh yeah, we've all got different butts. Some have got big butts as well, for sure, and some have none. So, but that's the thing is, I think a lot of people too often take certain things for granted, and you might ring up, or I've always loved eating eggs. I look forward to having eggs in the morning, and that's just me. So sometimes I'll have cereal to mix it up, but for me, my diet is based around the fact that I'll have eggs in the morning. And there's a very deliberate reason why I have eggs, because I believed, and I read a study that, it levels your insulin levels for the day, and I'll have high fat as well with, cottage cheese and avocado. And for me, I need the carbs because I'm training so much. So I add pieces of toast, maybe 2 pieces of toast if I'm training 4, 5, 6 hours in that day, maybe one if it's 2 to 3 hours, and then no toast if it's just a recovery ride. And you tick along with things like that, but I could read an article or we had someone else in our team turn around and say, Taylor, you're eating too much protein in the morning, you should be having cereal. But the problem is I had cereal and I found myself to be hungry again and eating more food an hour later. So, at the end of the day, I think there is a large amount of trial and error, and everyone's different, is my belief. But you've got to be open to ideas, but also just believe what you think feels right and comfortable for you and is best for you.
Is that regardless of what sponsors or people do? I mean, I know you've got to be seen to be supporting our sponsors. Our sponsors are the ones that pay our wages, so to speak, and they keep us going in the realm of professional sport. But I like hearing you say that people still feel they've got their own voice within the sport. Is that the same for you when it comes to attire, to protocols, programs, calendar? Like, is it all mapped out for you, or do you get some say in what you're doing?
We do get some say, and at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff is also quite strict. So say with our tyres, we are given a certain tyre, but we have faith that the people that in our team our team invests a lot of time and money in getting the best products and tyres, the best wheels, and again, recycling, the infamous for looking constantly for the 1%ers. If you have your beetroot, does it increase your performance before a max effort event or something like that? So to some degree, you have to have faith in the product, and they also do change. Quite often, we've gone from, a very generic nutrition brand to a new brand that's very health orientated, and that's bars that are made out of goji berries and seeds and no fructose, and I guess would be a very refined product compared to the previous products that we have. And we have to take it and eat these products, and we do enjoy it, but sometimes it doesn't agree with people, and we have to just be careful. Some people have stomach issues with certain products, so then they supply their own, and it's a common thing. But you just have to, I guess, be seen in the general eye of supporting the product as much as you can, but you can't let it hinder your own performance. If it is, you have to be responsible yourself and take control of it, because at the end of the day, our job is to perform. So if something's hindering our performance, that's what it comes down to, is just being responsible for fueling your own machine.
Oh, you know what? It's actually, take away the fact that you're a top professional athlete. Now, let's say we were just interviewing Taylor Gunman as a young person that we were interviewing. That, I think that's a philosophy for life right there.
Yeah, well, I think it could be a very marginal topic, but at the end of the day, you hear about it a lot in the news, and something will happen, and someone are very quick to blame the powers above for not doing anything to stop it, and this might be affecting a minority, but too much responsibility is taken away from the general public, I guess, now, I believe. But that's what it comes down to, and especially just if you want to be successful or if you want to achieve anything in life, it's how much do you want it and what's going to stop you from achieving that result, I believe. So, I still want to be racing the Tour de France, and I have to do what I have to do to get there, and I'm meaning that by looking after myself and making the sacrifice. I'd love to be back home living with my girlfriend, but she has her dream and I have my dream, and that's it's not actually a sacrifice to me at all, because this is what I think I need to do to be successful in cycling.
And Taylor, have you always had this drive? Like, did you always know that you would go this far?
I struggled at school, and I've always been a practical kid. I've always loved PE. I've always liked building things with my hands, and I've always wanted to be a professional athlete. I played rugby because I wanted to be an All Black. So to me, I think it's always just been a natural thing of just aspiring to be a full-time sports athlete, and with the current modern era, I think things are a lot more achievable. I don't think I'm a professional athlete. I think I'm a glorified amateur, because there are still levels above us to aspire to, and I think that's the thing, is you've got to always have something to aspire to. There are a lot of people that at my level that are actually quite content with being, I guess, racing an Australian circuit and international races, and they can come home. But, to me, the pinnacle of the event is, say, the Tour de France or being in a European Division 1 team. So, to me, I'm still trying to project myself forward, and that's only natural, is just wanting to reach the very top.
Do you know, it's interesting that you should say that, because I think that there's a remarkable difference between, as you say, the people who are content with where they are right now, and then there are people who are like you. And there's a place in the world for everybody. And it's amazing to actually unpick all of this with you, because there's a real difference that makes the difference between that 1% that actually does go that far and the others that stop along the way and they find their contentment point. Because of what? What is the difference what's the difference between you and the way that you think about your life, the way you think about your success, what drives you, versus the person that you're riding next to that's content to do the races in Australia and in international races, but they're not really concerned about going any further? What do you think that difference is between the two of you?
It's a really good question, because I think, at the end of the day, the professional athlete mentality is quite a adverse one, would probably be the polite way of saying it. If you look at if you think of any successful businessman on the stock markets or just in business alone, and then you compare it also with a very successful athlete, a lot of people consider them as arrogant, as stubborn, as selfish. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of that stuff, I'm not saying it's okay, because I don't believe in it, but you do have to be a degree of selfish, because you have to sacrifice a lot of things. You got to go out or have an early night instead of go out with your friends. You got to go out and train train during the weekend and when people are having their time off. But, there's also a small degree with athletes, I believe, that every professional athlete at the top of their game is actually a little bit crazy. Everyone's got to have a 2% craziness,
That's funny.
Yeah. And some guys, and I think there's a few guys in my team that actually have about 8% crazy. They won't change a single thing about their lifestyle, and everything is only for cycling and cycling this and cycling that. And they are so set in their ways that if something is changed, they're not going to perform. If they don't have their favorite cereal, or if they, a classic example is one of our team leaders lived in Italy and competed over there, and now he's settled down back in Australia. But But the thing is if he doesn't have pasta 3 hours before a race, he's not competitive at all. And he is, he just finds mentally he has this block where he just doesn't feel like he's up to racing.
So that's not a physical issue. That's a mindset issue. That's a psychological drama.
Exactly.
That he can control if he chooses.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's also what makes athletes so, especially top performing athletes, are so unique. You look at guys. I think a lot of people would think, Usain Bolt might be a showboater, but he's got to have that boxing mentality. He's got to have that. To a lot of people, that they see that in a very poor light, I believe. But he's actually turning up to an event. He's done the training. He's confident, and he believes in himself that much that he can actually turn around. I'm going to win this race. I'm going to be the fastest man in the world. No one can beat me. Look at me and watch me do it, is pretty much what it says to me.
Yeah.
Whereas, you have a sprinter who's running alongside him. I've done the best I can, and I'll just, I'll give it my best shot, and I can only run as fast as I can. I think if you look at those two different kind of people, you're going to be, I know where I'd put my money if I was a betting man.
Well, look at Stephanie Gilmore. She's the world champion in surfing, and I watched her interview one time, and she basically said that she wonders why the other girls are even bothering to come out and surf, because she knows she's going to win. And that's an attitude, and it's like Muhammad Ali, and I think sometimes there is that little bit of arrogance that may need to be in there in order to get it, because like my daughter's a surfer, and she's a great physical surfer, but mentally she's not getting it. And she's actually now doing some coaching on that. So, when you're an athlete, you have to look at the mental, the physical, the chemical of everything that you're doing. Otherwise, if you're not doing the three components, you don't have the edge anymore. Would you agree with me there, Taylor?
Oh, most certainly. Funnily enough, for me, when I won the New Zealand national time trial title, it was as simple as all I wanted to do was, my mental preparation was like, I've done the training, I can perform so well. I know I can do this. I know I can ride this hard, but I actually, in a sick way, wanted to hurt myself as much as possible. I knew it was going to be difficult with 10Ks to go. And that's the thing, is like, I wanted to beat everyone that wanted to start that race, and I was fortunate enough to actually win it, because that was the drive behind it. And I know for a fact I physically haven't gone that deep since, because it was such a huge mental effort required to get there, and it's a really interesting thing. And the biggest thing is I guess belief comes into all of that as well. So it's confidence, and it says a lot in any sport or any way of life. You got to have that confidence to, be it to start a business, or be it to compete or beat a best time, or whatever you want to do, even if it's to achieve a degree or coming into exams. I think if you just believe what you're going to do, it's so cliche, but it's funny how cliches are cliches, because they're actually right.
Taylor, that interests me, and I'm curious for people who are listening also. Does that confidence come because you've had a few wins that you maybe didn't expect right in the very beginning, and it starts to build your confidence? Or do you have to find confidence from somewhere, pluck it from thin air, right at the very beginning, and just go in blinded by confidence? What do you think?
Yeah,
where does it come from that it's actually genuine and lives inside of the cells of the body?
I think confidence is an interesting one, because I had a really good run of form this year, and I believed I was riding really well, and I was put in a few situations, and then I won an international cycling committee tour in New Zealand. Then I went on to win the Oceania road race and became the Oceania Oceania champ. So I had a very good flow-on effect. But we've got a busy season, and the next race that suited me wasn't until July. So from February to July, I had no racing. So how, where do I take confidence from that? I've had a big gap between races, and so we have a lot of downtime. You got to recover. So I love reading books, and Dr. Steve Peters has a book called The Chimp Paradox, and in a very simple way, you have your human side and your emotional side, and the human side's always 100% right. But your emotional side, or the chimp, is speaks the loudest.
Oh, yes.
What was the name of the book? The Chimp
Paradox.
Paradox. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah. Googling that right now.
So essentially, what it says is we have power meters on our bike, so it works out the amount of torque we put through the pedals, and from that we get a wattage readout, and you know what a good watts and you know what a bad watts. And I went into Japan with confidence because I was putting out better watts than what I had in January and February when I was performing very well. So that took me into the race with high confidence. And the thing is like I said, the chimp is the emotional side of your brain, and it's going to talk the loudest. And when you're training or when you're racing and it starts getting hard, the chimp's going to turn around and sit there and say, you can't do this. You're going to, I want to give up. It's the emotional side. It's saying, this is getting hard. Your body's saying, stop. The human side, of course, is, like I say, 100% right. And I can actually turn around and say to the chimp to shut up, because the facts are that I am writing better numbers and I can do this and I can go fast and I can perform. And I think that's where you've got to learn to build the confidence and just the belief in the facts that you can actually do these things because you've done it before.
So it's not buying into any of the self-talk that tells us that we're not okay. It's not buying into any of that. In fact, just using the facts and the evidence that's in front of you in the present moment to be your guide, rather than the noise, the head noise.
Yeah, exactly. And the head noise is always there, but I think that's why I love the chimp paradox, because you think of a chimp in a zoo and they're making a lot of noise, they're dancing around, and it's the same thing. Your head noise is quite literally just there as a distraction. I guess a lot of people who are competing or running a marathon or there's always, when they're tapering into event, everyone, it's proven everyone gets this smaller bit of doubt that, have they trained hard enough? Or then they'll hear about a friend who's done this much more training, and then they start doubting their own performance. But, we're talking the human side. You've got to be able to turn around and say to yourself, I've done the hard work, I've done what I've needed to do, and I can do this. But the chimp's going to be like, no, you can't. He's trained more than you. He's going to beat you. And I think, you're your own worst enemy. And the only person that effectively is going to slow you down or stop you from doing something is yourself, and saying, that was too hard, or, it's just that, I guess, that negative mindset instead of being excited. If you're looking forward to doing a race, or you're looking forward to beating a time, or trying to, that's where competition comes in, where you're trying to beat your friend who has trained more because he's had, maybe more time to train or taken time off work to train. Like, that's why people then perform, because they're actually not listening to the head noise. They're just putting the head down and doing it. And then again, it's another one of those many cliches where if you just put your head down and do something, it works, or hard work pays off. It's very black and white, I think, but it's true.
It's pretty,
definitely.
Yeah. It's a pretty.
I think from a perspective of a marathon. Sorry, Karen. I just remember when I was running marathons, there was many times, even if I'd start the event feeling amazing, and all of a sudden I'd feel a twinge in my calf, and then my fear would creep in that I was going to pull my calf muscle, and then you'd be having this conversation about, well, of course you're not going to pull a calf muscle. You've done this so many times. You've done the training. You're fine. And amazingly, you could also talk yourself out of a pain, which is really hard to explain. But I remember that very clearly, and hearing you talk about that, I do really remember those conversations in your head and how you would out-talk the talker that was trying to override what was actually happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, exactly. And you know, for me, I was explaining the other day, I did a very big hard training session, and in the final hour of a 5-hour ride, I had to complete 3-minute VO2 max efforts. So it's pretty much as hard as I can go after 5 hours of riding. That is very hard, and anyone who does do cycling or any sport would actually understand the level of difficulty that is. Now, I was stuck in Little Yadina, and I could have gone the quick way home, which would have only been 20 k's, or I could have ridden up to Mount Coolum and then come back down. Now, I was sitting there, and I could have very easily gone straight home. But then I was like, no, I need to get the time in, so I made sure I went the long way. And then along the road there, for me, it was like, oh, no, I can't do it. And then I actually remembered that I'm in a strong position in the team where I want to be the leader of our team next year. And the current leaders of our team who are making that next step, they would do that effort. They would do the effort because they want it more than me, don't they? Because they would do the effort. So from there on, I was more so competing with my teammates, but in a mental aspect. And, you know, like I said, to some people, that's probably a degree of crazy, you know, like you guys just laughed at me. But that's the motivator, you know, like that's the thing that's going to push you past that limit of improving yourself instead of being comfortable. You know, that's that 1% extra effort, and that's that little bit better that's going to make you perform at a higher level, and it's going to help you reach for your goals at the end of the day.
I do things where I'm running along and I'll go, if I just do one more K, then that means I'll probably earn another $3,000 this week into the bank account. Or if I do 2 more Ks, then I reckon the universe will support me to sleep really well tonight, or that my children will do well, or that Danny will get home safely. Like I have these things that if I do it, then nothing can interfere with the universal principles that everything will be fine. It's bizarre. Yeah. I barter with myself constantly, and I still do it to this day. Even if I'm going on a 5K run with a back injury, I have the same conversations that I used to have when I was running for Australia. It's so bizarre. So I think you'll find we're all laughing because we totally get it, I think, even from a business perspective.
And I think it'll be the same with all the listeners. They're all thinking that they're all actually not that crazy, and everyone's the exact same as well.
Exactly. Hey, sorry, Karen.
No, you go.
No, you can stay on that same, because I wanted to change tack.
Oh, I was going to say, so it's interesting that you should say what you just said, Taylor, because I think everybody's got their thing. Whether it's their children, or whether it's their relationship, or whether it's their business, or whether it's their sport, or it's crocheting or scrapbooking. You know, everybody's got their thing where they push themselves beyond their limits. They push themselves outside of what's normal, and they can sustain that because they have such great commitment and connection to it. They want to do it. It drives them. It feeds a part of their soul. Do you agree with that? Do you feel like this feeds you?
Yeah, it does. You know, like I love cycling. I love being fit, and I love being healthy, I think, and that's essentially what this is all to me. And you know, I am fortunate enough to be a full-time athlete, and I do earn a little bit of money. But it's my responsibility to perform. And what do I need to perform? I need to fuel my machine right. So I might train 30 hours a week, which is big, but there's still a lot of empty hours in the day. And I need to sit down and I need to put my feet up. So what am I going to do in that spare time? Some people watch movies, some people read a book, and some people go to sleep. But for me, it's again, this is where I gain my knowledge. I love meeting and talking to new people. We met Cindy the other day, and we've been able to have a good discussion, and I've learned a lot from Cindy already. And it's just my job is to fuel myself and look after myself, and I'll always want to look after myself my whole life. And essentially this sport and the way of life has just taught me to be, I guess, the person I am, which I can apply to any aspect of life. It doesn't have to be sports as well. That's where it can help with business, and it can help with anything you want to achieve. So I think it's a good principle and a good way of life that whatever you apply yourself to, that you're a favourite to, you'll probably find if you did the same thing to anything else. Even, for me, Mum eventually got me to apply myself to maths the same way, and English the same way, and by my final year I actually did quite well, because she's like, if you worked on your harder subjects like you did your cycling, you'll find it will come easy. And it did. Hard work paid off, and they were my weakest areas.
So do you think that for kids who could be potentially listening to this podcast, and their mums and dads listening to the podcast, and know that they've got a particularly talented daughter or son, do you think that this is a really good way for somebody to grow up? Like when you look at your friends and you compare your life to their life, do you think that this is something that parents should really be encouraging their kids to do, because it's both fulfilling and provides a level of income and gives freedom and choice and, all those wonderful things that you are blessed with?
Yeah, look, I never want to walk away saying what if. When I had to make the decision between rugby and cycling, to me that was a big moment in my life. But not at one moment have I sat back and gone, I wish I chose rugby. I'm so happy with my decision. It's just the fact that I actually discovered a passion for something, and I wanted to apply myself to it. The big picture of it all is that whatever may come in the future, I know that I've made the right decision choosing cycling over rugby. Yeah. Personally suited to me, but I also know that by the time that, say, I stop competing in cycling, that I don't think I'll ever look back at it and go, shit, I wish I changed that. I wish I didn't do that. To me, I've learned a lot. It's benefited my life in many ways, and I've gone through the university of life more so than anything. I think it would be one way to do it, but it's put me in a place where I guess I would have never been in another way. I've got a lot of friends who've gone to university because all their friends went to university, and that was as simple as it was for them, because they just went because their friends were going. They didn't want to miss out. But I've been able to live halfway around the world and meet people that I'll never meet again, but I've learned a lot from them, and I think that's a great way. You never know what's going to be. What opportunities are going to present themselves. And I think my mum quickly taught me never to say no. Even if you don't want to do something, don't say no to an opportunity, because it might never come back your way again. So, get a chance to do something, just jump in, and, don't be afraid to fail. I think that's the biggest rule in life, is to never be afraid to fail. And I think too many people are these days, because with social media or with everything like that, if you make a mistake, everyone knows about it. But and I guess that's the way our world is evolving. But I've probably taken on a bit too much off the bike this year, but I've learned that I've probably taken too much off the bike, and but I've had to learn to manage my time a lot better. I've had to, my reputation is on the line here, and things like that. So it's definitely, I've learned more from it than just turning the opportunities down, is pretty much what I'm saying.
Oh, amazing. Sorry, Kimmy, I didn't mean to interrupt you before.
No, it was really good. It was good. No, I just wanted to just change tact again. I was privileged to do some work with the New Zealand All Blacks a number of years ago, working on the players' partners profile and what that was like to be the partner of an elite athlete. And having been the partner of an elite athlete for over 10 years, it was just interesting for us to all really look at the culture of the New Zealand All Blacks around family, partners and relationships. And they've just had a big thing here on television about, the Australian cricket team losing the Ashes, and put it down to the players' partners and wives turning up in England, and some of the blame was put on the fact that the partners turned up. I just love to understand what New Zealand cycling's about in this angle, and what your thoughts are as a young athlete around whether relationships are really important or whether they could be detrimental, or what's your thoughts? Obviously, you've got a beautiful partner, so how does she sit and fit in all of this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and I think a lot of teams and a lot of sports do approach it very differently. I guess the very old European way in cycling is no partners, full stop. Like bike riders on tour, and if you want to come watch them at a bike race, that's cool, but you stay down the road and you can see them before the start and maybe a little bit after the finish, but the bike rider's job is to perform. On Avanti Racing, we're very fortunate. A couple of the boys have very qualified girlfriends and physios and osteos, and we need helpers in our teams called soigneurs. And these guys are fortunate that it's actually accepted in our team. No one's uncomfortable. No one's performance is affected in that way with the girls on tour. To us, it's almost easier. Everyone's quite friendly and everyone's very polite to each other as well. And I guess it keeps us boys in line because we can't be like a bunch of boys on tour. But, between Maddie and I, we met young, and I was a bike rider and she was just starting her medical degree. So for us in our life, she's always been a doctor and I've always been a nomadic bike rider. And, I guess our foresight is quite far down the track that we know if we will one day be set up properly and together, because we both want the same things. But for now, we're young. We don't, we're young. We can go out and achieve our goals. And she wants to become a doctor, and I want to be a bike rider. So long distance is hard, but every now and then we've been also very fortunate to travel around Europe, to travel around America together, to see half the world as it was. So. It's just having that support network there. For me, my family's most important because my folks' philosophy was very simple. They all put in as much effort into me as I would put into the sport. So if I was, if I just rode my bike and I didn't appreciate dieting, and if I didn't apply myself to training, my parents' commitment, I know, would quite simply be a lot less than what it is. It is an expensive sport, Before I made it into an amateur league or into my team, we had to buy our bikes, and you'd buy one bike, where I'm given 4 bikes from my team now. So, it's all personal at the end of the day, but I think bike ride, or just athletes in general, we're always in such a focused mind state, and there's a lot of pressure on. And I think, I'm not saying you have to have a girlfriend, but you got to have people that you can get away from your world a little bit, be it to go for a walk and just switch off for a moment. And I think that's why friends and families are always so good to have around, because when the pressure's on to perform, you want to be able to get away from it, to relax and just reset the body, because you'll find that you'll go a lot better afterwards.
I'd like to change tack just a little bit. Last night we had Taylor and his parents around for dinner, and there was discussion about young men athletes who are taking supplements, so-called supplements, and either dying or having health issues. What can you talk about this whole thing? The people that take these supplements, the problems that they're having, because you were the one that was talking about it last night, as well as I'd love you to address Lance Armstrong. And I understand that, because I think it's important we address what he did and how he got away with it for so long, and what your feelings are on what he's done to the sport, and what he taught you maybe.
Yeah, okay. So I'll start with the Lance thing, and it's a controversial topic no matter your opinion, whether you're for him or against him, quite literally. What Lance did for cycling, especially American cycling, is massive, and for the sport itself, it's evolved it. Lance was the first Tour de France contender that had certain riders specifically and only trained for the Tour de France, and then they already knew they'd be in the Tour de France, they'd turn up fresh, but they knew their job was only to help Lance win. Ways of old, before that all happened, everyone would be racing flat stick all year, and just to gain selection for the Tour de France, and then they'd all be so tired and fatigued from all the racing, and then they'd have to perform at the Tour de France. So I think Lance lifted the level of professionalism in the sport. He had the best equipment. He had this scientist creating the best time trial bike. His bike weighed 6.8 kilos, which was the lowest legal limit. He had the best climber to look after him in the hills. He had the best guy to look after him on the flats. They had the best nutrition. He had the best coach in the world. But also on the dark side of it, he also had the best doctor. He competed in a field of guys that all doped. So he was still the best in my eyes. He's a guy I'd still love to sit down and have a coffee with and have a talk to, because his craziness was how specific and how dialed and how oppressive he was of everything and everyone around him, and the fact that he just controlled the world. To the world of sports, he got the result, didn't he? So,
yeah, he did. But I admired him. I read his book. It's not about the bike, and I was in awe of him and thought, wow, after everything you've been through, and look at you, won. I think it was 7 by then, Tour de France's, and then when it all came out, but I actually now see him in a very different light.
Yeah, and you look at the Tour de France teams now. So if we looked at, say, Chris Froome from Team Sky, you're talking a €28 million team just to operate, and they're the best Tour de France team in the year. In the world, kind of thing. Now, all their training philosophy and a lot of the things they do is identical to exactly what Lance Armstrong did. They have Chris Froome, the winner. The whole team is going there only to help Chris Froome win. Now, they are a wealthy team, so they buy bike riders to support Chris Froome, who on their own right would be a leader on any other team. So pretty much they've bought out all the contenders and all the people specifically for this 3-week race of the year. They turn up fresh, ready to race. They've had the right training. They've had the right setup. They've got the best equipment, and they perform. There's no, and like I said, before Lance did that, there was no team that would specifically orientate their plannings around a race. So, the evolution of the whole sport, and especially our equipment side of it, is just accelerated since Lance. And it is an unfortunate story to end in the way it has. And I think a lot of people, just because of his nature and his personality of ruining people's lives in a very hard way, when they would say he doped and he'd tear their worlds apart. So a lot of people lost sympathy for him. But what they've ignored now is the fact that he actually contributed so much to the sport. Doesn't make it okay, but his demise is his own responsibility because of the way he's treated other people, and they want to see him suffer like they suffered. But thing is essentially what he's done to professionalism of sport on a whole scale is beyond anything, which is incredible.
Just another question then. Who do you want to be? Do you want to be the Chris, or do you want to be the person who supports, or you don't, like, where is your aspirations to be that top dog that everybody's supporting for them to win the Tour de France? Or are you happy if you even get to be that person who supports the winner of the Tour de France? Where do you want to be?
It's such a high level, and it's been quite realistic to my body type, and at the end of the day, it does come to it comes down to a lot of things. But it would be huge to be a Kiwi, to ride the Tour de France, and to win a stage before even focusing on the Tour de France. A Grand Tour is so hard on the body that you just don't know how it's going to react. I could one day do a race like that and find that it suits me perfectly, or you could find that I could probably get to day 12 and, hardly fight my way out of a wet paper bag. So it's a hard one to say. Like I said, for me, essentially it's to compete in the event, and to you're always wanting the success, but to how I personally would go would be a very hard one to actually say, because the body just enters a realm that most people would never go to, and that would be the only way to learn is by actually competing it. I think Chris Froome rode 2 or 3 Tour de France's before they realised, or a Grand Tour, because there's 3 every year: the Giro d'Italia, the Tour de France, and the Volta a España. So he'd raced 3 over 4 years, I think it was, and then they found that he had a taking towards Grand Tours. So it's a very hard aspect. For me as a bike rider, I believe I'm better suited to the week-long tours, which would put me in a good position to be a support rider in that kind of sense.
Well, that's exciting. That's very exciting.
It's awesome.
So let's also talk about young men, especially
the supplements.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, and as much as great as social media is, I think it's also I think my generation and younger are quite everyone's looking for the social acceptance and getting the most likes, and everyone wants to be aesthetically pleasing and big and muscly and strong and ripped and shredded. And I know there's been a couple of cases in New Zealand where young boys are collapsing on rugby fields and collapsing on in gyms and have died from the fact that they're pushing their bodies to these extreme limits to get this perfect image of what we're, of course, trying to allude for, Chase, the cover of the Men's Health magazine or whatever it is. And it's been a real interesting one to watch from afar, because I go against the grain. I'm trying to get as skinny as possible. I'm trying to lose muscle. So I find it very funny. And we have all these supplement stores around us now, and there are quite a few people where you can train to become a personal trainer, and everyone loves being in a gym. So what's happening in New Zealand is we've had with these kids collapsing. The formulas are simple. They have a very strict diet, and they work out, and these supplements you can buy that aren't regulated are quite easily accessible to anyone in the market. Even Australia alone had a bike rider who went positive from getting a caffeine supplement, but it actually had a banned substance in there, which was on the packet, but without the education and the research, he went positive because he just thought he was taking caffeine. But yeah, in New Zealand, I see it specifically. These kids are trying to get these built ripped bodies, and they're having their half a cup of brown rice and their 300 grams of plain poached or baked chicken and their broccoli, and that's their 7 meals, their meals. for the week, and they're trying to run a calorie deficit on top of their gym training with their shakes that have got this and that and the other thing in them. There's no way to actually know how pure those supplements and how pure those protein powders are. But, you know, a lot of the young bodies just aren't keeping up with it, and they're getting themselves into trouble and having, like I said, when you're trying to lift weights and trying to build muscle and your body's screaming for fuel, and you're trying to deprive it of the essential minerals that you have from a well-balanced diet and you know, things like that, it's just going to stop. And I think it's quite a problem.
You know, you're a very wise old man, really, and a young body. The way you've been thinking, I've just been listening to you this whole hour, and it would be lovely to see, you know, a lot of young men listening to this, perhaps the women and the mums that are listening to this, perhaps they give it to their sons to listen to, because I think that you're someone that I would like to follow more, and now that I've met you and learnt what you're doing. And I think young boys especially need to know this, that this is what's happening. They're not looking at it, and they don't even really understand what's in these protein supplements. And a lot of them are perhaps hydrolyzed, concentrated, isolated. They've got isolated vitamins and minerals in it. We don't know what this is doing to the body. And I just feel that it's about time that we look at the ingredients and we understand that our body has never, ever taken in these supplements before, and we don't know how it's going to react. And one of the things... Sorry, go on.
Sorry, no, you keep going.
Well, I was then going to ask you another question, but you go. You say what you wanted to say.
I just think it's okay. The first half of the psychology is that, you know, you look at every teenager, no matter what generation, no matter what year, everyone has that bulletproof phase. You know, nothing's going to happen to me. But I think there's that massive side of lack of foresight of exactly what you're saying. What the results are, you know, what's going to happen when being big and muscly and strong is no longer trendy. Things like that. 60 Seconds did a doco on a bunch of kids that were openly ordering testosterone and steroids and peptides off the internet and taking it because they got better results, they got faster results, and they were big and they were strong and they looked good. But they're again, the same thing. There was just no foresight. You know, is there any side effects? Is there any consequences? Are we going to have a generation of guys of people who... I'm not going to sit here and say that the body sculpting lifestyle is bad. I'm not going to say what they're doing is bad, because they're actually being active people. But I think it's the way it's going about it. You know, there is no foresight in the sense that there's this pure or these isolated supplements in that way. Is it reaching a content that our body can or can't handle? And are we going to have a generation of people that can't have livers that don't work, or, you know, kidneys that have failed just because they've abused substance quite early without that education that's there? Now, I'm sure you could achieve the same results through a healthy, well-rounded diet and a bit more harder work over a longer period of time.
You've brought up a really good point there around results over health, and I think it's probably a great way to finish up the podcast, because I actually think we could have you on a lot longer.
Oh, God, Jen, a lot longer. I have so many questions.
But I think you've brought up a really good point there, and I'd know if my son ever had the nous to listen to a podcast like this. You know, he's 15, coming up 16, and he's very influenced by what coaches and teachers and friends at school are saying, particularly around things like getting bulky and protein, and it's hilarious, actually. But I really think that you've brought down a really good point here, that you can actually get results based on sound jerfing, just eating real food, understanding what, biohacking, what works best for you and your body, putting it to the test on those endurance rides that you're doing, see which fuels come up. I mean, personally, just to know that, in marathons, when they give you these leptin things, these squeeze things, I get much better results out of, and I know so many people do, having a date squishy and a bit of coconut water as opposed to something like that. So it's so refreshing, Taylor, to hear your knowledge and your experience that you're finding for you. And I truly do believe that as you go through, if you can really implement the responsibility that you're giving yourself here and being a role model for younger men and women in this professional athletic world, I really hope that this gets out around the world, because I see you, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of Karen and I when I say you're a trailblazer. You are one in a million that is actually thinking this way. You truly are. And I personally just want to congratulate you and wish you all the best. And I'll certainly be following you more now. I look forward to it.
I think you can say that that's true for all of us, Taylor. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just for our listeners, I need them to know that Taylor is in a stairwell. And that's probably, I've noticed there's a lot of activity happening in that stairwell.
Yeah, it's starting to get a bit busy again, but that's all right.
Yeah. It's amazing. So, you've done well. You've come away from your family and your girlfriend's just arrived from New Zealand. And I just wanted to say thank you. And going into that stairwell where we thought it would be quiet.
That's all right.
We do apologise to people listening for the things that were opening and closing and the few little comments. But I just needed them to know what you have done to talk to us for this hour. And I, too, am just so appreciative of your time and that you've done this for us. Thank you, Taylor.
That's right, and like I appreciate it, and again, it goes back to what I've just said. This is an opportunity for me, and I'm not going to sit here and ever preach and it's something to anyone, but it feels good in a way also just to get across something that I believe so strongly about. I'm not going to ever put pressure on anyone to say this is what you need to do, but look at it from this angle, and it's awesome to actually talk to people of a like-minded, a like-minded idea that's shared. It's quick to learn that I'm not the only one in the world that actually thinks like this sometimes, and I thought I was just being crazy.
Taylor, we're going to have lots of people who are going to want to know more about you and follow you. What's the best way for them to track you down?
Well, I kind of keep my the Facebook side of my world a bit private, as it would be. But there's things like Twitter and Instagram, and quite literally the same username as Gunman. So just like my surname, Gunman is just like the terrorists, unfortunately. But the one and only. So it shouldn't be too hard to find.
All right, so T Gunman. People can track you down on Instagram.
Trust me, I found it.
It's brilliant. She's onto it. Look at her.
I would love to say that I would really love to go for a bike ride with you just to see you from behind, but I don't think it would last. I don't think.
Oh my gosh!
No, this is my argument with cycling. Again, anyone can ride a bike, and at the end of the day, yes, I might ride a bike and I compete at a high speed, but we can still go out and ride alongside each other and enjoy each other's company at some way. There's nothing that inhibits anyone.
No, my friend, you've missed the point. She does not want to ride next to you. No, that's not what she's saying. She wants to ride behind you because she wants to see your butt moving up and down. That's what she's after. Don't be thinking it's for friendship.
Just tell your Maddie, and I'll tell my Danny that we'll be very happy riding right beside you, behind you, but not in front of you. There you go.
Sounds all right.
Taylor, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being a part of the show and being so open and just, sharing everything about your experience. It's been so inspiring and such an eye-opener on so many levels. I've got like 3 pages of notes that I've written down. Really amazing.
Oh, I'm glad I could add some content.
No, it's been great, and I think we'd all agree with that, hey?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Definitely.
Well, so for everybody who is listening to the show, please check Taylor out and start to follow him on Instagram and become a groupie, I say. Just go for it. And I think that you're going to find yourself as inspired as we are. So if you guys have got any questions for Taylor or anything that you want to, or any comments, all you have to do is go to our Facebook page, which is allthews.facebook.com/up-for-a-chat. And you can also post any comments that you have on allthews.thewellnesscouch.com/up-for-a-chat. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure that you give us a 5-star rating when you go to iTunes, and also tell everybody that you know about Up for a Chat, because we have a blast over here, and I think it's time that the rest of the world joined in on the fun. So make sure that you do that and join us here next week on Up for a Chat and become part of the ripple effect that's changing the world. We love hanging out with you on the ride. Have an awesome, awesome week. Bye, everybody.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.